Today's really going to be a story about pair vote, and in that story will be kind of a journey through using online tools, in particular about social media, and how they can be used in whatever you happen to be doing, whether it's for personal business or for an organization or an issue, whatever it happens to be. This is sort of the story of my experiment in many ways in using a lot of online tools to do a lot of stuff for just one person's effort. So let's dive in. And at any time you have questions, I'm going to be not able to say a lot about all these different tools, so if you do have questions, I'm happy to dive in a bit more and even show you a little bit about how they work. I am not using my computer, so I'm not sure how well that'll work, but be happy to answer questions about things as they come up. So, why did I do pair vote? Probably like a lot of you, I'm passionate about a lot of issues, whether it's the environment or social justice or peace, and I found that part of the problem with a lot of these issues is and the reason why we're not getting a lot of traction is the system's just not working for us, right? We're not getting the attention of the people we want to get attention to, or it seems like a lot of politics is partisan and not effective, and so a lot of people are disenchanted about politics. And really what we want is for government to work for the people, right? To be effective, to not be about partisanship or about furthering one's career, but really about serving the people of Canada. So a few years ago, I started to, in my own mind, connect the dots and realize that a lot of the problems we're facing are because of one simple thing, and that's how we vote. And that the style of government we get and the type of representation we get all comes back to the way in which we vote people into government. And so I became real passionate about voting reform and bringing something in called proportional representation. And so then I thought, for this election, how could I bring attention to this issue? I mean, how many people here have heard about voting reform or are interested in voting reform? Okay, so a few more hands than I expected. That's great. Maybe partly because of the pair vote thing, I don't know. So I did some looking around online, trying to find a good attention getter for voting reform. And Google didn't disappoint me. It came across something called Vote Pair, which was done in the US in the last, in 2000 and 2004. This idea of Vote Pair. And I thought it was a really neat concept. Basically, one person in one state would swap a vote with someone in another state, in the states where it was a sort of closely contested results. And if you can think back to George Bush's last victory, that was a very close result. So that was the idea here. And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. I wonder if it's ever been done in Canada. And I couldn't find anything online, and I couldn't find any reasons why it was not a good thing to do in terms of legalities and whatnot. Elections Canada wasn't responding to my emails. So I went ahead and decided to do this and launched Pair Vote. And really just spent a few hours putting together a WordPress blog, which I've done for many other things. It wasn't too hard to do. Put together some content, put in a little form so people could sign up and say basically who they are, what riding they're in, who they wanted to vote for in terms of a party, and who they were willing to swap their vote for in exchange for that vote. Went to the cottage camp for the weekend. I did do one other thing. On a few Facebook group pages, groups that were interested in voting reform, I published, I think, to maybe 4 different groups. I put something up and I said, I've got this site I've just launched, come check it out. Maybe it's something you'd be interested in. Went away to camp, and on Monday, I got emails like this from CTV National News saying they wanted to do a story on pair vote. Big surprise. Had no idea it would start generating this kind of attention. And in fact, I already had 50 sign-ups just from that simple bit of promotion. So clearly, I had tapped into some kind of undercurrent of dissatisfied voters wanting a better option. And clearly it was interesting enough and novel enough that the media was wanting to know more. So that's the first key in any successful online strategy, is it's no matter what you do, there's got to be something that will resonate and will spread. So then I started doing more things to build up the campaign. I created a Facebook page, and anyone not heard of Facebook? Is anyone not on Facebook here? Okay, so a few hands. So Facebook is another one of these game changers for little guys like me who want to spread a message. About half of my traffic early in the campaign came through Facebook, even though my site was not on Facebook. But it allowed people to spread messages very quickly from one friend to another. And part of helping them do that was to create this Facebook page. And what that allowed me to do was pull in my blog posts from my website. And it also then allowed them to sign up to become fans, and then when they were fans, then I could send them messages, and then they could send their friends messages. And then I also created an event for Election Day about swapping your vote. And it didn't send out to very many people, maybe 50 or so people I knew, and also the fans at the time. But it begins to mushroom, right? By the end of the campaign, there were over 2,500 people who had seen this event invitation. And most of those were sent from people not by me. Another interesting experiment. As I said, I got a lot of media requests. I did probably about 30 media interviews, some national, some not. And some were with TV. And of course, being in Sault Ste. Marie, they don't necessarily have a reporter based here. Surprise. So I offered or suggested to some of them, well, why don't we do a Skype video chat? And this was like off the charts. None of them had ever done this before. Some of them offered to do it without kind of telling their bosses that they were going to do it, because they didn't really have any policies around this. So this here is a clip of an interview I did with City News in Toronto. And I actually did the interview while I was at a conference in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to try and play a little bit here. We'll see how that goes. So I'm clicking a link to the actual video that's on their website, assuming that's going to pop up. Maybe not. Oh, here we go. Getting there. So this is the first time they'd ever done a Skype video. You can see
the site came about because I was looking for a way to bring attention to an issue that I care most about, which is voting reform. I really believe that voting reform is the source of a lot of our problems with democracy here in Canada. And so I discovered pair voting online when looking for an attention grabber for the election, and discovered no one was doing it in Canada or had done it before. So I decided to try it, and so far it's been a great success.
Tell us how many people have signed up.
Well, if you'd asked me a few days ago, I would have said about 1,000, but in the last few days we've actually almost doubled. So we'll reach over 2,000 by the deadline tonight, midnight Friday, or midnight Sunday.
When we talked about proportional representation in the last...
So that was pretty cool. And I did a few of those different video chats. I did one with A News in Ottawa. There might have been one more. I can't quite remember. But again, if there's any questions at any point, ask away. Now, this is my latest addiction, and I can thank PairVote for the experiment of getting me there. How many people have heard of Twitter? Okay, how many people are actually on Twitter? Okay, what's your experience of Twitter so far? Anyone want to share? Okay. Anyone else? Drinking from a fire hose, right. I'd signed up for Twitter a long time ago and didn't do too much with it, kind of like most of you, kind of figuring out, is it worth spending or wasting my time on this? And then I experienced Twitter through Pair Vote, and that's what convinced me that Twitter is the next big thing on the internet. What I was able to do with Twitter and the Pair Vote, a few things. One was it gave me another audience. I could auto-post my blog posts through my Twitter feed, and then people could share them around. It's quite easy to, again, like Facebook, to spread messages, because basically the way it works is people follow you, right? So on my personal account, I have over 500 people who are following me. The Pair Vote one had maybe 100 or so. But if they see a message and they think it's worth sharing, with a click of a button, they can what's called retweeting the message. And very quickly, you can have stuff spread all over the place. Recently, I saw somebody post like a funny video about something, so I retweeted it, and I saw that same retweet about 10 times that day, because people thought it was kind of funny and cool. So I could get my message out to a lot of other people, particularly those who are passionate about voting reform. They're following this thing, so they want other people to know about it. So it just spreads and spreads and spreads. But the really cool thing is I could use Twitter to find those people who want to hear my message. So I could do things like set up a search and use the RSS feed from that search, so I would know every time somebody mentioned the word strategic voting. And then I could reach out to that person on Twitter and say, hey, I'm Mr. Pair Vote. Here's something you might be interested in. And that's how I got my followers. And in fact, there's one really amazing story about this guy, Chris Joseph, who I found through Twitter, an actor based in Ottawa. I mentioned Pair Vote to him, hadn't said too much to him, then found out he'd written a blog post, an amazing blog post. I was just blown away by what he had written about vote swapping and the need for voting reform. From that, formed a relationship. He then went on to do at least a couple media interviews. One you can see a picture of there, he did with A News. And he also did some stuff with CBC Morning Radio in Ottawa. He also spent an incredible amount of time in the last week when I was swamped and at this conference and trying to tidy things up to do this actual pairing thing. He spent hours and hours and hours cleaning up the data that had been submitted in, and without him, I don't know if I could have pulled this whole thing off. So all that through just monitoring Twitter, trying to find people who were interested in what I was doing. Another thing that I would do is use something like Google Alerts to just monitor chatter on the web. So a blog post, a news article, whatever it might happen to be. And that also paid huge dividends. I didn't have a lot of time for this, unfortunately. If I had a bigger campaign group, we could have done a lot more engagement like this. But with some really useful examples, I found an article on rabble.ca and just put up a comment about what I was doing in relation to the article, and that led to somebody telling somebody else, who then called me for a media interview, and they published something on their online magazine. So again, a lot of interesting tools to find the right conversations and the right people to help you in your engagement. Another thing I wanted to do was to try to bring people back to the site on a regular basis, knowing that my blog posts weren't that amazing. I thought, well, let's do something a little more interactive, a little more visual. So I thought, well, maybe I could create a Google map of everyone who signed up, so everyone could see kind of where they are, where people are voting, who they're voting for. I mean, I would have loved to have done a more snazzier example here, but I did this with free tools on my own time. Basically took a download of all the registrants in a spreadsheet file, and used this website called batchgeocode.com. Free service. You paste in your spreadsheet, and it will generate the markup language that Google Maps needs to create a map. So all I did was give it the location, the postal code, the riding, preferred party they wanted to vote for, and I imported that into my own personal Google map, which again is a free thing, and then I could embed that map right in the site. And it turned out to be a good... Well, the batch geocode is the service that will create the markup that Google Maps wants. So if you have a lot of data that you want to plot, it's a very quick thing to do. Obviously, every time I want to update the map, I had to do this manually. I mean, there are tools to sort of do it through code, but A, I didn't have the time, and B, I'm not so much of a good coder. But it's kind of on a weekly basis I would update the map. And this turned out to be the second highest ranked page on the site. Got a lot of traffic, so it was a good experiment. The other thing that I used was a commenting system called Intense Debate. And again, another free tool which I could embed in my blog. And I used it primarily, well, obviously for blog comments, but I created a page because I wanted people to engage each other a bit more, to get a little more personal. And so I invited people to share their voter stories, right? So why are you here? Why are you considering vote swapping? And I had 83 comments by the end of the election. And a lot of people who were really passionate. And the thing that I was really impressed by was most of them were tying the real solution to voting reform, which is why I did this in the first place, right? Was to build up that frenzy and connect people who maybe didn't realize who else was passionate about this issue and try to kind of build a bit of a grassroots movement. So that turned out to be a really useful thing as well. And it wasn't just one side of the spectrum or the other. There were conservative, right-leaning people. There were left-leaning Green Party NDPers, which is really what I wanted. I wanted this to be a nonpartisan thing that everyone could be involved in. Another tool I used was something called Blitz. Again, these are all free tools. I use this as an email sign-up, so maybe you're interested in the issue, but you don't want to vote swap, or you are interested in the issue and you just want to keep up with what's on the site. So this allowed me to send my blog posts to them as, not too often, so they didn't get annoyed, but allowed people to sort of stay connected without, having to come to the site. There's also an RSS feed for those who are familiar with RSS, but most people still prefer email at this point. So I could use the Blitz tool, and the other great thing with the Blitz tool is it has a way to sort of blast a custom message. So in addition to content from the site, at some point, if I wanted to say only a week left in the registration or whatever, or how it all works, I could send that out to people. So that didn't take very much to set up, and proved to be a very useful tool. So this is sort of a snapshot of all the tools I used in the campaign. Again, mostly one person over 4 weeks, probably spending about 3 hours a night. Have a lot to thank my wife for and kids, and sort of ignoring them for a number of weeks. I really had no idea it was going to become what it did, but really thankful for the opportunity, because so often we get involved in things and we don't see sort of an immediate impact. And for me, this was different. This was it was a real rush, having media contacting me all the time, and people wanting to get involved. And even after the campaign, I've had a lot of people wanting to do more beyond the pair vote. So, what was the result? In the short term, there was a couple interesting things. When we combined the stats with another vote swapping option in the campaign, there was a Facebook-related one as well. That was more tailored to getting Harper out. But when we tallied up our stuff together and we looked at where the vote swaps were, we actually found there were 2 ridings where there was a significant impact, even just in our little effort. And the closest one was in BC, where the margin of victory was 68 votes. And if all of the swaps had happened as we had arranged them to, 50% of the difference was through vote swapping. So that was kind of cool. At least the media thought that was kind of cool. It's not really the right solution, but it was sort of an interesting stat. We had 6,000 people registered to vote swap, We had 2,800 people who actually got paired. Not every person who registered was able to be lined up. And between both campaigns, we had over 100 media interviews. And one of the other cool things was people actually made some friendships. So when you got paired up, the way it worked was you each got an email, right? So he said, so-and-so is going to vote green for you in exchange for your Liberal vote in your riding. And the idea was you emailed each other to kind of build a bit of a trust relationship there. And of course, being the campaigner, I got all these emails. Well, I didn't get all the emails, but I got some of these emails. And it was just amazing, the emotion and the passion that a lot of people shared about, why they were doing this and why they were willing to vote for the Liberal guy because they thought he was a decent candidate. And people actually told me that they made some new bonds, some new connections. So I thought that was a wonderful side effect of doing this campaign. One of the first swaps that I did was for someone in a Saskatchewan riding, and her dad was running in a close race in a different riding. So she really wanted to swap her vote for that, and that ended up happening. And so that just some really neat personal stories. So, of course, in the end, my main goal was to bring attention to proportional representation, and this is just an example of one of the quotes on the site. And in monitoring the online Twitter chatter and on blogs and stuff, just an incredible amount of discussion about proportional representation. Fair Vote Canada, who I've been involved with in the past, who's not had a lot of success in my view, bring a lot of attention to this. Their numbers on membership just went through the roof after the election. Not just solely from Fair Vote. I mean, I think a lot of people were disenchanted with the fact that the vote changed nothing really in terms of the outcome. But there was definitely a new undercurrent behind the issue, and it continues to move forward. A number of us are now working on the campaign in BC, where they're going to be voting on proportional representation for the second time in May, and a lot of us see that as sort of the opportunity to get a foothold in Canada for real voting reform, and so I'm pretty excited about that. So this, in a nutshell, is sort of my presentation. I'm happy to demonstrate some of the tools if you'd like to see them a little more up close, or if you have questions about anything here today. So yes.
It depends on people keeping their word.
Oh, in terms of the swap.
Yeah. Too, right? I mean, that's the other thing, is that you are making an agreement with somebody.
Sure. So the question is about the trust level in doing this swap thing. Well, one thing to keep in mind is for a lot of these people, their votes never mattered before. They've got nothing to lose, right? You're in a riding where it's been Liberal for 60 years, right? The same guy's been there for 40, and there's just no way he's going to lose, right? So you've got nothing to lose. In every election, there are about 6 million wasted votes. In other words, you vote for someone who doesn't get elected. In a PR system, that number is almost nil. Your vote actually ends up voting somebody. So, yeah, there's certainly a risk there, but I think. Right. Yeah, exactly. And in a lot of ways, they kind of trust another voter more than they would trust a politician, I think. So. Yes, Ernie. Right. Well, again, remember, it was mostly just myself, and then that last week was a tremendous scramble, especially because I had a full week conference right before the election. I have to thank Harper for timing that for me. It was pretty much a mad scramble by the end to get the actual coding and whatnot done behind the algorithm. So it was kept to just to get it working was an achievement. But I have had a lot of developers, including some who can develop Facebook apps, wanting to sort of do the next version of stuff. And so my hope is for the BC referendum And there's an actual election then too that will have a much slicker thing in place to handle that. So and that's just starting to ramp up again. Yes.
In your opinion, would you think that we would have the representation problem that we do have in the school if we were a parliamentary system with just two parties? The base problem, the fact that we do have so many parties now.
Well, so the question is, do we have too many parties? Well, when you go to the grocery store, how many choices of cereal do you have? You know, we're much bigger, much more diverse population than we were back when there were two parties. And our current system was designed for two parties, and that's why it's broken today, because it doesn't work anymore for a multi-party system. And the majority of Western democracies, what they've chosen, and what I think has worked pretty well, is a PR system. Most Western democracies between 50 to 100 years ago, so we're not talking about new experiments here. We can look at a lot of countries and see what they've done. They've chosen a PR system, and there are tons of different flavors. So you can do the Canadian version of PR and try to make it work for Canada. So I think actually we need more diversity. I think when you look at the parties we have today, because of the strategic voting issue, where they only focus on the polls and so on, there's not a lot of divergence even in the parties we have today. The policies are very, very similar. We don't have much choice. Whereas in a PR system, what tends to happen is you have parties that are much more core to their issues and their values, and you get more choice that way, based on what other countries have experienced. Yes. Yeah, Italy and Israel are often pointed to as countries where PR isn't working. And I think you also have to look at historical and cultural issues in those countries when you look at reasons why democracy is or isn't working. Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I think the thing we need to focus on when we look at voting systems is does a voting system, the parliament we have, represent our values? And that's what citizens' assemblies have done in BC and in Ontario and in PEI. The interesting thing about citizens' assemblies, they were basically mandated to get together for a year and look at voting systems and find a voting system that would best match our values in terms of democracy. And the interesting thing about citizens' assemblies is they're kind of randomly chosen, but if you look at the democratic makeup of those assemblies, they match very closely with the population they're trying to represent, far more than any parliament has ever done. They're given a year to look at different systems, talk with experts. The whole process is very transparent and open. I was actually quite amazed at what was done in these assemblies to try to come up with an appropriate answer. And every single assembly has rejected our current system as not even on the table. What they end up doing is looking at different PR systems and ultimately recommending one. MMP was the one recommended here, STV, single transferable votes, the one being recommended in BC. But I have a lot more faith in the Citizens' Assembly to come up with a good solution than I do with a bunch of MPs who have sort of their own vested interests. So I encourage people to take a look at some of the work that they've done to come up with the selections that they've done in terms of voting systems. Yes?
My question is, you've got limited time and limited ability to deal with new
Hmm. I'm going to give the good consultant answer and say it depends. But it really does. Some that I haven't mentioned up here, like LinkedIn, is a professional networking site. And so if you're focusing more on professionals, LinkedIn has groups. It has LinkedIn.com. Great site for business networking, right? They have groups. They have question and answer sections. So if your focus was more on engaging people at the business level, that would be a good place to look. It's also useful for recruiting. But Twitter, for me, is the real game changer. I'm self-employed. I've gotten more job opportunities through Twitter than anything else I've done in the last 2-3 months. I could give you so many examples. But it takes time. Whatever you're doing, it takes time, right? You have to view things over the long term. So whether it's engaging on Facebook or Twitter, it's about building relationships and growing that over time. And I think the main thing is to have an attitude of giving, right? That when you invest in others and help them with where they're at, that will come back to you. Give you some examples. So on Twitter, I'm an agile software development coach. So I monitor the keyword agile. And whenever people have questions or they're struggling with something, I'll try to help them, point them to resources. Maybe I'll have some answers directly for them. From that, I've helped one guy in New York. He's a part of a startup. The other two are in Europe. And helping him answer some initial questions, and that's now led to a chance to have a Skype chat next week to help him with their business directly, engaging me in helping them with distributed agile. I went to a thing on the weekend called Change Camp, which is kind of related to this. A bunch of people getting together to rethink the way citizens and government engage each other, much in a more Obama style, if you will. Found out about Change Camp through Twitter. Went down there, spent some time with a blogging studio company. They do design work. Spent the whole day with them doing agile stuff. He's raving about me on Twitter, and I'm getting more interest now because of what I did there. And all these relationships came through Twitter. I've gotten close relationships now with a lot of key stars, if you will, in the agile world, including one who just published a book, and she sent me the book for free just to review and to share it with others. So if I was going to invest in anything, I would give Twitter a serious look. Sometimes it seems like wasting time, right? Not all of it's serious or whatever, but there's a great quote that I heard about Twitter and Facebook, and it says kind of like Facebook is for the people you know or used to know, and Twitter's for the people you want to know. So, yes? Mm-hmm.
Best practices, who's doing what, and they've tried a blog, and they've tried different things, and nothing seems to work in terms of staying updated and keeping in touch with people. Twitter work well for that as well?
I'd seriously give it a look. There are versions of Twitter that companies can sign up for. They're kind of like more private Twitter networks, if you will. I'm trying to think of them offhand. Yammer is one. There's a few others. There's actually an open source one too that a company could set up on their own server. And so that sort of allows for more, less public internal sharing. But it's really, really easy to do because with Twitter, I don't know if anybody wants to see it. I mean, Twitter is basically this. Let's go. So I use a desktop client for Twitter. The web is just not a functional way to deal with Twitter because you've got messages coming back and forth all the time. So I use one called TweetDeck, which I can't show you because it's on my actual computer. But TweetDeck. And what TweetDeck allows me to do, because I have 500 people I'm following 700 people, and I have over 580 followers, so that gets a little, you talk about the fire hose idea. I have to group people into different groups, and I track different keywords, and TweetDeck allows me to do that very well. But, so here's my stream. So these are people who've posted stuff that people I'm following. I get 140 characters to say something. So the nice thing that makes Twitter work is it's so simple, right? So I can just say, I'm answering questions during my pairvote.ca presentation. And I could add a little bit more if I wanted here. Sure. I think like anything else, you just kind of learn to find a balance. Because, yeah, I've had times where I've probably done too much tutoring and not enough blogging, for example. And after a while, you just kind of find that balance. Like, I'll have to turn Twitter off sometimes. Like this morning, when I'm tidying up my presentation, I don't have any notifications coming through Twitter at me. But like I said, the investment I put into Twitter is coming back tenfold so far for me. The relationships I'm making, as a small business guy in Sault Ste. Marie, trying to find a way that I can stay in the Soo with my skills is really, really hard. And this has opened up the door to me to get a lot of business. In fact, there's 2 companies, one in Ottawa and one in Toronto, both contacted through Twitter, that just told me in the last 2 weeks that my timing in contacting them was perfect because they're ramping up to do more work that they can handle. So, again, that was through Twitter. So it's opened up huge doors for me. So, yes? My background. Well, I'm from the Soo originally. And I started out as a software engineer kind of guy. Spent some time overseas doing some volunteer work, and I've always been doing sort of project management type stuff in IT. And in the last couple of years, I've switched more to what's called an agile coach. So it's taking this process called agile, which really helps companies, not just software companies, but that's sort of my focus right now, but helps companies to deliver faster, higher quality, and therefore lower cost. And so that's my focus right now. Hoping to get some engagements in the Soo, but that's taking a little while. And I've always been interested in, and I've lived online because I've done a lot of work remotely. So I've worked with companies in Atlanta who've got teams down in Argentina. I worked with a company based in Boston who has contractors in Europe and in North America. So I'm very used to living online in my work world. So I get exposed to a lot of different tools and things that can help businesses really use online effectively. So the one thing I am doing locally right now is I'm working with Lou Dare of DearVivian.com and helping him take sort of his offline media campaign and bring it online. Not that I'm an expert, but just I've had a lot of experience with these tools and can kind of help them get ramped up quickly. So. All right. Thanks very much for coming.